Imagine being trapped on a multi-billion-dollar warship for 250 days straight. The fresh food is running out, the plumbing is backing up, and there is this relentless, inescapable vibration rattling your bones 24 hours a day.
And, there's just zero opportunity for any real decompression.
Right, it's constant. And that is the grinding physical reality for 5,000 U.S. sailors right now.
Welcome to the Claire Horatio Daily World Brief, available at clairehoratio.com. Today is Friday, August 14th, 2026.
And as today, we're watching Tropical Storm Lala, which is currently bearing down on Hawaii's Big Island. It's packing 60-mile-per-hour winds, and it's really threatening to strengthen into a hurricane before making landfall. So our mission today is to examine a stack of sources that highlight these severe, localized tests of institutional resilience and, frankly, human endurance. We are covering the lethal global impacts of a supercharged El Niño, that crisis of morale aboard a deployed U.S. aircraft carrier, the deadliest month for Ukrainian civilians since the start of the 2022 invasion, and the grim demographic mathematics for women in Afghanistan exactly 5 years after the Taliban takeover.
It's a heavy briefing today.
It is. Let's start with the immediate threat from Tropical Storm Lala. As of today, it's sitting about 420 miles southeast of Hilo. The forecasts are predicting up to 25 inches of rain in specific pockets of Maui and the Big Island.
Which brings an imminent threat of life-threatening flash floods and mudslides. Governor Josh Green has already declared a state of emergency.
But atmospheric physicists are looking at this localized crisis as an early, violent symptom of something much bigger. There's a massive supercharged El Niño currently forming in the central equatorial Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, and the sea surface temperatures there are trending so far outside the previous parameters. Forecasts are showing a 69% chance this event will exceed the strength of any El Niño dating back to 1950.
Wow, any El Niño since 1950.
Since 1950. And the peak of this phenomenon is expected between October and December of this year.
Let us unpack the mechanics of what that peak actually means for the global climate anchor, specifically the Amazon rainforest.
Yeah.
Because when you read the environmental research, you realize this is, it's an emergency nested within a pre-existing emergency.
Right, because you have to think of the Amazon not just as the lungs of the planet, but as this massive biological water pump for the entire South American continent.
Exactly. The mechanism relies on trillions of trees transpiring moisture into the atmosphere, which creates what scientists call flying rivers. These aerial rivers basically cool and irrigate the continent's agriculture.
But if you degrade a third of that forest's components through farming and mining, which we have, and then you throw a historically supercharged El Niño into the engine, that pump doesn't just slow down.
It breaks. But what is the actual breaking point scientists are watching for?
Well, the breaking point occurs when consecutive severe droughts permanently disable that transpiration mechanism. Without the constant cycling of moisture, the forest tips into a state of high flammability.
So when those flying rivers dry up, the cascading effect is immediate. Continental agriculture fails due to lack of rainfall, and the forest transitions from a massive carbon sink into an active carbon emitter as it burns.
It really is a mechanical failure of a biological pump.
Shifting the perspective from future risk to current reality, though, reveals a terrifying picture of how governments are struggling to manage these mechanical failures right now. We don't need to wait until December to see the lethal consequences of atmospheric heating. Look at Germany.
The numbers coming out of Germany are just staggering.
They are. As of today, the German government has recorded 12,500 heat-related deaths in 2026 alone.
And we're seeing entire villages evacuated due to forest fires, farmers losing their harvest to drought, and highly vulnerable hospital patients suffering in facilities that completely lack air conditioning.
Which is wild to think about. If 12,500 citizens died in a kinetic military conflict, the federal government in Berlin would be in emergency sessions around the clock.
Oh, absolutely. It would be wall-to-wall coverage.
Yet, despite this immediate lethal reality, the government has remained astonishingly quiet. They're avoiding even convening a basic heat summit. How do modern societies function when a threat is this lethal, but the political will to act is suffering from such profound paralysis?
Well, we are witnessing the stark disconnect between public alarm and political capacity. Just a few years ago, movements like Fridays for Future mobilized hundreds of thousands of people in Germany.
Right, they were everywhere.
But today, those protests have dwindled, activists face severe hostile backlashes on social media, and the broader public is just overwhelmed by competing economic anxieties and inflation.
Because coordinated national policy is frozen by this political division, adaptation is being forced entirely at the local level. Municipalities are having to basically engineer their own survival.
Yeah, the northern German city of Kiel is a prime example of this. After devastating storm surges, the city is actively redesigning its infrastructure on its own dime.
Wait, didn't they plan to flood local soccer pitches during storm surges?
Yes, exactly. They are essentially using recreational spaces as giant municipal sponges to absorb excess water while mandating green facades to cool urban corridors. The burden of survival has completely been pushed down to the lowest civic levels.
That dynamic of individuals carrying a massive systemic burden at the absolute lowest levels connects directly to the reporting on military endurance. We're looking at deeply alarming conditions aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln.
Right, this U.S. aircraft carrier has been deployed for over 250 days now.
And lawmakers are demanding answers from the Pentagon regarding severe food shortages, pervasive mold, broken plumbing, and profound physical exhaustion among the 5,000 personnel living on board.
You really have to look at the operational context to understand the severity of this breakdown. This carrier was deployed to the Middle East ahead of U.S. attacks on Iran earlier this year.
And the deployment was originally set to end in May, right?
Right, but it's been repeatedly extended with no definitive return date in sight. An endless operational tempo fundamentally degrades combat readiness. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth recently dismissed the reports of poor conditions as, quote, completely misrepresented.
But the Navy's own studies acknowledge that troops aboard lengthy ship deployments suffer the highest rates of serious psychological distress compared to other military branches.
Exactly. This distress is driven by poor habitability, relentless noise, and grueling schedules that just prevent adequate sleep.
The specific details emerging from the families of these sailors directly contradict the Defense Secretary's official dismissals. A relative of a sailor currently aboard the Lincoln reported their family member lost 65 pounds during this deployment.
65 pounds. That is incredible.
It is. They describe the living environment as a constant vibration, with zero opportunity to escape the physical toll of the ship's engines. And this physical and mental degradation is tied directly to the broader U.S.-Iran conflict.
Yeah, the military strategy initiated in February assumed a swift resolution. But instead, it has empowered Iran to choke the Strait of Hormuz.
And that waterway operates as a crucial economic choke point. Disrupting it has driven up global petrol prices and fueled domestic inflation for the very citizens those sailors are deployed to protect.
So there is this vast gulf between the performative political rhetoric of swift military victories and the grueling material reality faced by service members. The strategy assumed a rapid collapse of Iranian resistance.
But when that failed, diplomatic patience was replaced by aggressive posturing, resulting in a static, high-tension standoff.
Right. And the physical and psychological breakdown of the crew aboard ships like the USS Abraham Lincoln is the hidden direct cost of that geopolitical miscalculation. When policymakers write checks based on best-case scenarios, the enlisted personnel pay the physical price when reality sets in.
Just really quickly, for more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit clarinhoratio.com. Now, moving from the attrition of military standoffs to active reciprocal destruction, the United Nations has confirmed a grim milestone in Eastern Europe.
July was the deadliest month for civilians in Ukraine since the early weeks of the full-scale Russian invasion in the spring of 2022.
The UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission verified that at least 437 civilians were killed and over 2,600 were injured last month.
The tactics driving these casualties represent a deliberate shift in warfare. The deaths are largely caused by Russia's intensified use of long-range missiles and heavy glide bombs directed at urban centers,
combined with short-range drones operating continuously near the front lines. The strategy relies on overwhelming air defense systems and systematically targeting civilian infrastructure to break the societal endurance of the Ukrainian population.
Exactly. It's a war of attrition on the civilian psyche.
Wait. For those trying to understand the military mechanics here, how does a glide bomb fundamentally alter the risk profile for civilians compared to a standard missile or drone? The sources emphasize glide bombs specifically as the primary driver of this recent spike in urban casualties.
So a glide bomb is essentially a massive, traditional, unguided bomb that has been retrofitted with flight control surfaces, basically wings, and a guidance module.
Okay, so it can steer itself to a degree.
Yes, but what makes them so devastating is the launch mechanic. Russian aircraft can drop these munitions from high altitudes, 30 to 40 miles away from the target, which keeps their planes safely outside the range of standard Ukrainian air defenses.
And then the bomb just silently glides toward the city.
Precisely. Because they carry massive explosive payloads, sometimes over 1,000 pounds of explosives when they hit residential buildings, they don't just cause damage, they cause total structural collapse.
Which means they are incredibly difficult to intercept once launched, rendering civilian life in cities utterly untenable. But Ukraine is actively retaliating, though their focus appears to be shifting toward Russian economic infrastructure rather than purely kinetic battlefield targets.
Yes, we saw a recent Ukrainian drone strike on the Gazprom Neftekhim Salavat refinery.
Which is a massive petrochemical complex located 800 miles deep inside Russian territory.
800 miles. And a separate long-range strike completely shut down the Orsk refinery, with regional officials stating repairs could take up to 6 months.
And the delay is specifically because international sanctions prevent Russia from importing the required replacement equipment, right? Is this conflict shifting permanently into an economic war of attrition aimed squarely at the energy and export sectors?
The shift is definitive, and the global ripple effects are immediate. By targeting refineries deep within Russian territory, Ukraine is systematically dismantling its opponent's economic lifeblood.
Because it forces Russia to make an impossible choice. They either leave their most lucrative export facilities undefended, or they pull vital air defense systems away from the front lines to protect oil infrastructure.
And that economic attrition extends to the sea as well. Russia has been forced to halt operations at all 3 major Black Sea grain terminals in Novorossiysk due to the persistent threat of Ukrainian drone strikes.
This reciprocal destruction of infrastructure means the war is directly impacting global food and fuel supplies, creating massive vulnerabilities extending far beyond the borders of the conflict. Tomorrow, August 15th, marks exactly 5 years since the Taliban retook control of Afghanistan.
5 years. And according to the reporting we are reviewing, the lives of the country's 22 million women are completely unrecognizable compared to half a decade ago.
The sheer scale of the oppression is unprecedented globally. Afghanistan remains the only country in the world where girls are officially banned from secondary and higher education.
And it's a systematic nature of this exclusion that makes it so devastating. Taliban officials, including their foreign minister, frequently claim to the international press that women are not, quote, totally restricted.
But the reality on the ground is a brutal, codified enforcement of public space. The regime has systematically eroded basic rights, barring women from most workplaces, restricting travel without a male chaperone, and introducing laws that provide legal cover for child marriage.
Furthermore, we are seeing a horrifying resurgence of public corporal punishment used to enforce these edicts through sheer terror.
The specific accounts from the sources are chilling. A woman named Shaima was flogged 50 times in front of a crowd of 200 men simply for speaking to men to whom she was not related.
Just for a conversation.
She was forced to publicly confess to being an apostate. Her eldest daughter now wakes up screaming in the night, permanently traumatized by the violence inflicted on her mother. But when you look at the downstream effects of barring women from society, the impact goes far beyond the immediate trauma of public violence.
Yeah, a severe maternal mortality crisis is currently unfolding across Afghanistan.
Because when you ban women from accessing male doctors and simultaneously sever the pipeline for training new female medical professionals by banning women from medical school, you aren't just enforcing religious modesty. You are mathematically guaranteeing a maternal mortality crisis.
And that is the core mechanism of this policy. The systemic removal of women from healthcare, education, and the economy isn't merely a human rights atrocity. It is the deliberate engineering of a public health and demographic collapse.
A country cannot sustain its population when half its citizens are barred from receiving basic medical care or contributing to the economy.
No, it can't. Yet, amidst this calculated erasure, the profound resilience of Afghan women remains the counter-narrative. Many are running underground businesses and secret educational networks,
taking immense personal risks to maintain some semblance of autonomy.
Their primary plea to the international community is to recognize that they are still there, fighting for survival and basically begging the world not to look away.
That concept of deliberate systemic manipulation brings us to the health of democratic institutions, starting in the United States. We are tracking a highly coordinated disinformation campaign against Abdul El-Said, who won Michigan's Democratic primary for the U.S. Senate earlier this month.
Following his victory, fabricated claims began circulating wildly online.
If you just casually scroll through social media, you might think you were seeing standard political mudslinging. But when you look at the actual data behind these rumors, you realize it is a mathematically impossible targeted campaign.
Right, like one prominent lie claimed he received 1.4 million votes in Detroit.
Which is a mathematical impossibility given the city only has about 480,000 registered voters. Another completely false attribution claimed he supported the September 11th attacks.
The mechanics of this disinformation are deeply cynical but highly strategic. Researchers who track political communication view this not as random online trolling, but as a systematic delegitimization tactic.
Because Michigan is a vital swing state in national elections.
Exactly. By exposing voters to mathematically absurd but emotionally resonant claims of voter fraud, and by explicitly exploiting Islamophobia against a prominent candidate, the architects of these campaigns are executing a deliberate strategy.
The goal is to undermine public confidence in the electoral system itself. It's about creating an environment where objective truth is obscured by a thick fog of manufactured outrage, making voters doubt the integrity of the entire democratic process.
And this culture of political evasion and manufactured grievance connects directly to the news out of the United Kingdom today.
Right. Nigel Farage won the Clacton by-election today, taking roughly 63% of the vote. Yet, he completely refused to attend his own vote count.
He actually tried to claim the police warned him to stay away for his own safety.
But the most revealing part is that the local police immediately put out a statement, explicitly denying they ever gave such a warning. By skipping the event, Farage successfully avoided being photographed with the runner-up, a satirical candidate wearing a trash can on his head named Count Binface.
Who surprisingly took 27% of the vote.
I mean, incredible. But more importantly, Farage dodged immediate press questions about a resumed parliamentary investigation into an approximately $6.75 million undeclared gift from a crypto billionaire. Has modern populism mastered the art of performing grievance while entirely insulating itself from accountability and scrutiny?
The events in both Michigan and the UK really represent a highly evolved strain of modern politics. It's a political model that relies entirely on inflaming discontent and evading institutional guardrails.
The manufactured outrage targeting the Senate race in Michigan and the theatrical stunts used to avoid scrutiny in Clacton, they really share the same political DNA.
They do. These actors show very little interest in the actual painstaking work of governing or in fixing the complex economic and social problems they campaign on.
The primary goal is the performance of opposition. They utilize stunts, fabrications, and disinformation to monopolize public attention, while simultaneously insulating themselves from the consequences of their actions or the rigorous demands of public office.
Drawing today's distinct pressures together, it becomes clear that we are not looking at a single, unified global crisis, but rather several distinct pressures testing institutional resilience and human endurance in vastly different ways.
We are watching systems strain under immense pressure, from the atmospheric physics driving extreme, localized weather in Hawaii and mass casualties in Germany, to the deliberate political tactics degrading democratic norms in the U.S. and the U.K.
And you just have to consider the stark contrast between the leaders avoiding scrutiny and the ordinary people bearing the brunt of their decisions. Whether it's an Afghan woman bravely running a secret business in defiance of a brutal regime, a sailor enduring 250 grueling days at sea due to stalled diplomacy, or a voter trying to navigate a deliberate sea of mathematical disinformation when top-down systems become performative, neglectful, or outright oppressive, the heaviest burdens always fall on the individuals at the very bottom. What happens to the fabric of a society when the exhaustion of those individuals finally outweighs their endurance?
A vital question to end on. For more daily world briefs and classic audiobooks, visit clarinhoratio.com.